Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to today's video. This episode will guide you through the issues of the Uncanny X-Men published by Marvel Comics in 1977. Issue 104. "50 miles off the northwest coast of Scotland, on a crisp and clear Monday morning, things are going wrong. An argument is brewing between a boat rental shop owner called Angus McWhirter and the X-Men of Irish descent, Sean Cassidy, codenamed the Banshee. Even though an agreement has been signed and the owner has been paid, he is not allowing the X-Men to take the hovercraft out of the harbor it's docked at, much to the chagrin of Sean. All the while, Kurt Wagner, the X-Men called Nightcrawler, is trying to be his charming and friendly self. But he gets shunned by two passers-by, as is often the case because of the way he looks. Back to the argument which is unfolding. McWhirter tells Sean that the agreement of renting the hovercraft was with Dr. Moira McTaggart of the Edinburgh University, and not with a bunch of costumed freaks. He also states that they can forget about a refund. The money paid has been forfeited as a penalty for tying up the hovercraft with their fraudulent reservation, as he puts it. Sean cannot believe what he's hearing, and McWhirter tells the X-Men to get themselves off his dock. He then gets approached by an ominous-looking Colossus, who, with his Russian accent, suggests that it's only fair for them to keep the hovercraft if McWhirter intends to keep the money. Not very long after that, McWhirter is hanging a couple of inches above the dock, and the hovercraft is embarking with the X-Men on board. While Sean is steering the hovercraft, he realizes this is basically their own fault for showing up in their costumes, but there's little they can do about that now. Apparently, the X-Men got a phone call from a worried Moira McTaggart in New York last night. She hasn't heard a word from a guy called Jamie Madrox, who was supposed to keep an eye on her island, while she was staying in New York. She's afraid he's had some kind of an accident, which is why she rented the hovercraft, so the X-Men could get to the island and check out what's going on with him. As they arrive at the island, and as Sean tells Kurt that he thinks the island is a lonely place to stay for a woman, suddenly the island lights up, and before Sean can even finish his thoughts, a bolt of eldritch fire lashes out from the island, envelops the entire hovercraft and tears it apart from the inside out, tossing the X-Men around and launching them into the water. A couple of minutes later, once all of them have made it to the shore, Banshee asks how everyone is. Apart from being cold and wet, Nightcrawler asks why it seems that every time they're in a mechanical vehicle, it seems to crash. And Wolverine tells him it's probably dumb luck, but it might be the case that someone has it in for them. The way the hovercraft just exploded makes Nightcrawler think about it, but the Banshee tells him it didn't explode, but rather everything metal looked as if it came alive and the vehicle literally tore itself to pieces. Colossus thinks to himself how this is yet another attack and quite possibly another fight to the death. His life was a lot simpler back in Russia, but yet he would not give up friends like these, and asks if that is Moira's laboratory. With none of them having been here before, they had no idea what to expect, but surely Banshee did not expect it to be this big at all. As Banshee thinks to himself how Moira gave up this and her professorship in Edinburgh just to become a housekeeper at the mansion, he wonders if he knows her as well as he thinks he does. He then tells the X-Men to get up the hill and head for the laboratory, with Colossus leading the pack, and as Colossus rushes out, eager to get into some action again, he immediately bounces off some kind of invisible force field and lands on his back. Wolverine asks him if he's okay, and Banshee and Nightcrawler investigate the invisible barrier. It seems to be a dome of solidified air, pinning them to the beach and making them like sitting ducks, which they seemingly are, as the ground below them rips apart and they get transported on a big chunk of soil, as if the force field just tore it from the earth. And as they get projected straight into a wall, Banshee tells them they have only one chance. They need to hit that wall with all the power they have and hope they can punch a hole in that wall before they get smashed. And at the Banshee signal, all of them cut loose and they actually manage to rip the wall apart, giving them entry into the laboratory. But only just. Had they been going faster or had the walls been thicker, the results would have been entirely different. Banshee then starts to see a terribly familiar pattern in the attacks, but as he's about to tell the others who he's thinking about, he doesn't realize how close that person actually is. Storm then notices how the door in front of them starts glowing and is turning red hot first and white hot after that. It takes about a minute and the metal of the door starts screaming as it crystallizes and starts to crumble. Banshee then tells them all to quickly run for cover before the door explodes, which it does. Only to reveal the one person who welcomes them to the site of their final battleground. This man tells them they are going to die here, and neither their powers nor their skills can save them from his wrath. He tells them all to look at him, for he is the X-Men's oldest and deadliest foe. The master of the Legion of Evil Mutants, and soon to be the lord of the whole world. For this man, this mutant, is Magneto, the self-proclaimed master of magnetism. At that exact moment, on the landing pad just outside of the laboratory, a very familiar aircraft is touching down after a rush flight eastwards from New York. It is being piloted by Cyclops, and he tells Moira McTaggart that they have arrived, but that there's no sign of the hovercraft in the bay. Figuring the X-Men must be running late, he hopes that they haven't run into any trouble. Moira expresses that Cyclops sounds angry to her, which he confirms. He tells her that he has been with the professor since the very beginning, and that this is the first time he has ever heard of this so-called Mutant Research Center. He does not like this secrecy one bit. This Mutant Research Center turns out to be a complex designed to cage the most dangerous mutants in existence. And as they both enter the facility, Moira adds that it's not only meant to lock the mutants up, but also perhaps to cure their hatred for humanity. She tells him it's her life's work, which she began in happier days when she and Charles were, and she pauses there for a bit, students together. She then tells Scott to follow her through the halls and into the main lab. Scott says that he hopes that none of her guests, so to speak, have busted free, and Moira tells him that of course they haven't. They then find someone lying in the shadows on the floor, and it turns out to be Jamie Madrox, the person Moira hadn't heard from in a while. As Jamie is coming to, Moira asks him what had happened to him. His first response, as he's seeing Moira, is a worrying one. Jamie asks her what she's done, because if she has brought the X-Men here, she will have murdered them. And he then starts to explain. On one of his routine morning rounds, he got ambushed by Eric the Red, joined by Havoc and Polaris, who had somehow been able to get past the facility's automatic security systems. And once they had taken care of Jamie, they went straight to a specific holding cell, namely the one Magneto had been kept in ever since he had been turned into a baby by the alien being known only as Alpha. It looked as if Eric the Red was in a rush. He almost seemed scared even. Eric the Red gestured at the baby, and some sort of ray zapped out from his hand, and within mere seconds, Magneto had been turned into a grown man again. Magneto and Eric the Red then talked all day, with Eric suggesting an alliance against their common enemy, the X-Men, and with Magneto being furious for the humiliation of having been turned into a baby and then being locked up at this facility at the mercy of Xavier at that, he craved vengeance. After hearing this, Cyclops is alerted instantly. With Magneto reverted to being a grown man, and probably at the peak of his powers, he tells Moira to take Jamie outside and into the jet immediately, and be ready to take off at a moment's notice. Moira responds by saying that the X-Men have handled Magneto before and they can surely do it again, but Cyclops tells her those were the old X-Men, and that with Magneto having been a harmless baby at the time of the formation of this new team, Professor Xavier and Cyclops never figured they would have to face Magneto again, so they never trained this new group of X-Men to fight Magneto. Scott adds that they are good kids, but against Magneto they won't stand a chance, as he rushes out. And while this is happening, this new team of X-Men are about to get caught up in a fight with Magneto. And as it seems, Magneto knows all about these new members, after having been informed about them by Eric the Red. Magneto tells Wolverine his all-consuming arrogance earns him a lesson in how to respect his betters. A lesson which Magneto will be happy to teach him, as he uses his magnetism manipulating powers to drag Wolverine across the room by his metal claws, and crashes him into one of the walls. Immediately turning his attention to Colossus, who wants to avenge his teammate, Magneto tells him that his body, made of organic steel, makes him the weakest of all the X-Men. As a matter of fact, in Magneto's hands, Colossus is also the most dangerous to his friends and teammates, as Magneto uses his powers to lift him up and use his body as a projectile to crash into Storm and Nightcrawler. Magneto, reveling in how much more stronger than ever he feels, reborn even, with this much power at his fingertips, is now toying with the X-Men. Simply just testing the limits of their abilities. But if it's a test Magneto wants, Storm will provide him with one. She unleashes a hurricane at him, but Magneto, though impressed, tells her it's a wasted effort, since he can stand all she can throw at him and more, for he is Magneto, and his power is supreme. And within the blink of an eye, Magneto has set up an interference field, thus hurling Storm's lightning bolts right back at her, taking her out for the time being. Colossus, who is still flying through the air, grabs a piece of metal construct to stop his trajectory, and from afar he can hear Storm scream in agony. He knows he has to return to the fight, but he also realizes that Magneto was right about him. In his mutant steel form he is entirely at Magneto's mercy, and in his human form he will be safe from Magneto's powers, yet useless to his fellow X-Men in a fight. This dilemma really leaves Pyotr Rasputin with no choice but to face Magneto as the powerhouse Colossus, and he rips a huge part of a metal construct to throw at Magneto, hoping to catch him unawares. But Magneto is no novice. He evades the metal junk and with a simple gesture launches Colossus through one of the walls and dumps him in the ocean surrounding the facility, as if Colossus is nothing to him. And once he hits the ocean, Colossus starts to sink immediately due to his immense weight. But even here, Colossus does not dare to revert to his human form, because his organic steel skin is the only thing protecting him from the bitter cold waters, in which a normal man would freeze to death in a matter of minutes. Back inside the laboratory, Magneto is hurling metal junk straight at Nightcrawler, who can only try to teleport away to safety. He has to find some other way to get to Magneto. Not yet realizing it himself, Nightcrawler's trick won't work against someone whose mutant powers can sense any disruption along the magnetic lines of force. And what's even worse, Magneto can almost sense Nightcrawler's destination before he even gets there, dumping the same debris, which he was just hurling at Nightcrawler through the air, right above the spot where Nightcrawler materializes at. And Banshee, who is now attacking Magneto, tells him he's not done yet as long as an X-Men lives. But Magneto's response to him is simply that Banshee cannot harm him, but he can smash the Banshee whenever he pleases. Banshee questions the claim out loud, telling Magneto that it sounds like a lot of big talk. But then again, he says, that is what Magneto is most famous for. He then asks Magneto whether he's forgotten that the Banshee is one of the X-Men who his powers do not have an effect on, and he unleashes a sonic scream to shatter the floor underneath Magneto's feet, who starts to fall. But in no time, Magneto lifts himself up again, using his powers to create a balanced anti-gravity field around himself. But he also attacks the Banshee at the same time, by hurling metal junk at him. Not impressed with the attack, and saying that he has faced far worse in the danger room, Banshee uses his vocal cords to create sonic bursts to push the debris away. Banshee knows that taunting Magneto will not win the day, but that he has to keep Magneto off balance until the other X-Men are able to recover so they can hit Magneto all together at the same time. Magneto commands Banshee that out of all of the members of this new X-Men team, he is the only one worth fighting, even though it's for a lost cause. But Banshee tells him to not bet on that. And while Magneto asks him why not, and says to the Banshee that he has already won. He uses his mutant powers to pull ferrous particles from the wreckage and from the very air around them and fuses those particles around Banshee's body, and leaving the Banshee shrink-wrapped and seal-tied in a form-fitting coffin made out of metal. Magneto then starts to mock Banshee, asking him where his bravado is now, and tells him that his air is gone and his life will soon be gone as well. And the metal casing with the Banshee's body inside crashes on the floor. Man for man, Magneto finds these new X-Men to be stronger than the old X-Men. Yet, he has beaten them all. Save for one, because he finds out when he turns around that he has not beaten Cyclops yet, who has found the spot where the battle was taking place at and immediately lashes out with his I-beam. Magneto got caught by surprise. Careless and overconfident. He was only barely able to get his shields up in time to deflect Cyclops' blast. Even though Magneto is stunned, and Cyclops is hitting his shields with full strength, it is still not enough to pierce through them. Cyclops knows that there's not much time left, as he can tell Magneto's already gathering his wits and pulling himself together. And with the fact of Eric the Red also being involved, he knows there's much more at stake here than just the X-Men versus Magneto. And as Cyclops rushes over to where Banshee and Nightcrawler are lying, he blames himself for not seeing a pattern. After Banshee had told him just recently how Eric the Red was the mastermind behind the ambush at Cassidy Keep, he should have realized. And if this pattern means what he thinks it does, he figures that Professor Xavier is in a lot more danger than they are in right now. Nightcrawler starts to wake up, and Cyclops tells him to hurry up and find the others and to head to the landing pad behind the laboratory. There is no time to waste. He then directs his attention to Banshee and focuses his concussive I-beam into its narrowest form and surgically starts to remove the skin-tight encasing surrounding the Banshee. If Cyclops makes only one false move, he will surely maim Sean. Storm then approaches him, asking him why Nightcrawler told her to go to the airplane and why they are not attacking Magneto. Banshee is confused about this as well, but Cyclops tells them that as soon as they find Colossus, they are pulling out and heading for New York. Wolverine does not agree with this and says that this fight is not over yet. But it is, as far as they're concerned, according to Cyclops. And despite Wolverine's objections, the X-Men team leader just made the call, and if Wolverine doesn't do as Cyclops tells him to do, he will blast Wolverine down and carry him out himself. Wolverine complies this time around, but he tells Cyclops that from now on, all bets are off. And as the team rushes out, they pass the holding cells and Wolverine recognizes Dragonfly, one of the Any-Men they had recently battled at the NORAD headquarters, and she seems to have escaped. When they get outside and arrive at the landing pad and their plane, so does Colossus. Aurora voices her joy in seeing her teammate again, alive and well. And Colossus tells her that he is alive alright, but just as sick of water as Nightcrawler is. He then asks Cyclops when they will be attacking Magneto, but gets the same answer from him. They will not attack Magneto. And he will explain why not once everyone is aboard the plane and they are airborne. And so, a couple of minutes later, Scott explains how everything started clicking into place when Jamie Madrox told him Eric the Red had ambushed him. First, Eric the Red tried to kill the professor at Kennedy Airport. Then after that, he used the Juggernaut and Black Tom to lure Xavier into a death trap at Cassidy Keep. And now Magneto's back, stronger than ever. And with all the X-Men being kept busy fighting Magneto, Professor Xavier is left unprotected back in New York. And that's why they're heading home now, because Scott is convinced that Eric the Red is after the Professor, and they have to get back there to stop him. Wolverine tells Scott that he can try and justify his decisions all he wants, but that doesn't change the fact that Scott made the call to run away from a fight. That he turned the X-Men into cowards, and that is something the Wolverine will never forgive him. Back inside the laboratory, Magneto, back to full strength and ready to go, realizes that the X-Men are gone. He fought the full X-Men team all by himself and beat them all. They have run away, leaving Magneto triumphant. Magneto then leaves as well, and never notices that behind him a new horror stirs and slowly comes awake. Another mutant, held in captivity in the facility, is about to break loose. Mutant X is about to escape, but that is a story for another time. At the same time, across the face of the universe, at the command deck of a Starjammer, the captain of the ship tells one of his crew members that the stars are moving into alignment. Chode asks his captain if he is afraid. Christopher explains to his fellow Starjammer that if the plan of the Emperor goes through, if he opens up the dimensional gate, it will be the end of everything. Closer to Earth, about 8,000 miles above the Atlantic Ocean, a familiar starship orbits the planet. Its sole passenger is happy to find that she has reached the Earth. But almost all of the ship's fuel is gone, with barely enough left for planetfall. And yet this woman must make it. For her brother, the Emperor's mad plan must be stopped. But then, as if out of nowhere, an Imperial cruiser appears, with photon torpedoes homing in on her ship, and is shooting to kill. On the Earth's surface, in an apartment in Greenwich Village, Jean Grey is reunited with her parents and she's joined by Professor Xavier and her friend Misty Knight. They are all happy to see one another, but what they don't realize is that they are being spied on. By none other than Eric the Red, joined by the brainwashed and former X-Men Havoc and Polaris. Eric says to look at them, how peaceful they are, enjoying the last hours left in their pitiful lives. Because even if the X-Men arrive in time, it will do them no good. The die is already cast and the final player is about to make his entrance on the scene. And when he does, the princess will be his and Charles Xavier and his X-Men will be no more. Thanks for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. You can help growing this channel by liking, subscribing and sharing. This tells YouTube that the videos I'm making should be recommended to others and would be very much appreciated. See you next episode.